it's good to be back. It's good to be back. It's good to be back in a tailgate downtown. Yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. It's good to be back in a tailgate downtown. Yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. It's good to be back in a tailgate downtown. It's good to be back in a tailgate downtown.
Welcome to another wonderful edition of Tailgate TV. This is our best podcast of the year. This is the best podcast we've done in 2025.
Absolutely.
And today we have Stephen Thompson of VooDoo Power out of Adrian, VooDoo Power Podcast, which we're going to talk about a little bit, let you guys know where to find that if you're looking for another podcast. But we're going to have some fun with him. We got a list of questions here, and we're just going to talk about some gym stuff and some training stuff and all kinds of things.
All kinds. And I tell you, we appreciate you being here because this is really exciting for me. I really enjoy this kind of conversation with a guy that's been doing it. And, you know, we've had a few conversations about some of the stuff and some of the athletes you've worked with. Pretty impressive, but we're going to have him run down that list a little bit as we get farther in the show. But where did all this get started? This VooDoo Power, obviously there had to be some kind of a brain seed that went off in your head and said, hey, we got to get this started.
Well, I had a couple kids. They played sports just like a lot of kids do. You're taking them to practice, in and out. You're gone all the time. You're meeting yourself coming and going.
Absolutely.
Well, all of a sudden they started driving and they started playing on different teams. Well, I didn't have to chase them anymore. Well, I have this huge amount of time on my hands.
Okay.
I probably wasn't using it wisely. You know what I mean? Put on a little bit of weight.
Right. Oh,
got out
really?
of shape. Yeah. Was coming home from work and just kind of finding the couch.
Gotcha.
Well, then I started working out.
Okay.
You're going to have grandkids. You're thinking one of these days in your head, I'd like to be able to chase them around or whatever. That turned into getting a gym. I started working out at home. Then that turned into a gym membership. And then the research and everything. Well, I found out I kind of liked it. And I was understanding what they were saying. I was seeing progress for probably the first time in my life.
Okay.
I'm like, well, maybe I can help some kids if they wanted to. So we just started talking with kids, and it was going okay. Talked to a few gyms trying to get maybe a high school membership. Well, there's a couple problems with that. If you got a good gym, you don't want it full of high schoolers.
If you're going to make money, right?
If you're going to make money, because they're going to run your other people off.
Absolutely.
Just because kids are kids, and people are coming after work. They're tired. They're stressed. They want to do their workout and go home.
Right.
So nobody was really willing to cut any sort of rate, which I totally understand.
If anything, they up the rate.
Yeah, they probably would. You know, and high schoolers, a lot of them are on a fixed budget. Big membership is just not in the cards for them. So we kicked around this idea for a while. Then COVID happened. Once that happened, all the gyms shut down. Well, I had an old set of weights.
Right.
I rode horses in the barn. I had an arena, and it was about that time of year. So we just took the weights I had and put them in the arena of the barn.
Good idea.
Started working out there. The only problem was every night you had to pick it up.
Right.
Because you were going to be riding colts, you know.
Right.
So you had to do what you had to do. So it didn't take a whole lot to understand that wasn't going to work. And we knew it was going to get cold eventually. So we built a platform in the alleyway, and we made a small platform that was just big enough for a couple guys.
Okay.
That turned into, hey, let's just add on to the barn. So we added on to the barn, put a gym in it. Kids started coming, and we just recently added on to it, or extended the gym because it was getting a little bit crowded. Wow. So that's
great problem to have.
It is.
Great
it
problem
is.
to have. My goodness.
So what's your current capacity? What do you have in there now, or what are you shooting for? Or since you extended?
They run in shifts. Okay. So there's certain nights that it'll get incredibly busy.
Nice.
There's certain nights that they like, and they'll all show up together. They have their own Snapchat deal where they're all talking to each other. When are you going? When are you going? And they'll show up in their pairs and groups and however. We've had it pretty full in there. I think right there before the state game, there was 15 boys in there.
Okay. Really? Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
Oh, yeah. You just got to keep everything straight.
Oh, sure. And if you've watched any kind of TikTok videos about horses and stuff like that, they will get into all kinds of stuff, talking about leaving the stuff in there. They do. It's so funny to watch people talk about their horses.
Well, I guess now that you bring that up, so when we put the platform before we added on, when we had the platform in the barn,
Right.
it was 2020. We'd bought in some chickens. We didn't have the coop or anything. It was
Right.
just something to do. Everybody
Sure.
was home, so they wanted chickens. Well, we had chickens running around the barn.
Right.
Well, if you got chickens, you know what comes with it.
Yes.
Every night when we were done, we had to take trash bags and cover up all the equipment,
Right.
or it would
They'll
they'd roost on it
and poop on everything.
Oh, everything. So yeah, it was some very humble beginnings back in the start.
Yes.
Sounds like every gym where I'm from.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, he's from Arkansas, so. The horses and chickens in the gym's not uncommon.
No. Okay, so talk a little bit about how you started the gym. Let's back up even before that. When you were in school and whatnot, did you play sports? Did you do some training? Kind of what was your background as a kid?
I played football at Adrian. I wasn't super awesome. I'm not going to come on
Most
here.
people from Adrian aren't, but you know.
I'm not going to come on here and tell you how great I was. I played on some really good teams. Had some really good teammates that did well. My senior year, I had a pretty good year, but other than that, not much to talk about.
Coach Bruto, you were a coach?
Yes.
During that time?
Yeah, and then I wrestled my junior year.
Okay.
And then looking back, I should have wrestled my senior year, but that is a very tough sport to break into that late.
Yeah.
And I probably wasn't prepared for everything that took, mentally or really physically, technically, all the things that go along with it. So I didn't wrestle my senior year. Other than football, that was kind of the extent. I rode some bareback broncs and did some rodeo stuff, did a little training. I wouldn't call myself a meathead by any means, but I didn't mind lifting weights.
What I want to back up a little bit, talk about the Bronx. How was that? Was that how much did you ride? Did you ride quite a bit, or just a
In
little
high
bit here and
school?
there?
In high school, we got pretty serious, and I rode with Stephen Smith quite a bit, and he went on to do some really cool things. He went to college and rode pro for a little bit. I think he made it to the CNFR out in Casper.
Awesome.
And me and him rode together quite a bit.
Okay.
And then I got hurt later on, and I started finding out that it probably wasn't cut out for me.
Right.
So then I
Right.
started starting colts and things like that was a lot more enjoyable.
Sure.
We moved to Montana when our girls were young and chased horses out there, and that was going to be the path. It sure wasn't the gym.
Right.
It was going to be horses, and then here we are.
Well, I was going to say, you were talking about lasting a year in wrestling. I lasted one practice, and I was like, this is not for me. This running up and down the bleachers and running and running and running. I was like, dude, I played basketball a lot, and I've never run this much. That to me, wrestling, those young men and young ladies are phenomenal. That is a sport all its own.
You better
love it.
You better love it, and it takes a special kid. The mental grind
Oh,
is tough enough, let alone getting on the mat
yes.
and then having the physical grind to match it.
Absolutely. It's so the goal for Voodoo Power is
I would like to see whoever wants to come out and try to reach their dream, reach their goal, whatever that may be. The goal is to have a place for them to do that.
gotcha. That's
It's
awesome.
It's free. We don't charge.
Wow.
For high school athletes. They just got to show up and deal with the environment. And sometimes the environment's rough. You got a bunch of high school kids in there.
Sure.
They're going to say stuff to each other. We don't. To me, I would call it uncensored. They listen to what they want. They talk relatively freely. It's an environment where I want them to come in and be themselves.
Yeah.
Now we have a mix of male and female, so we try to keep, I try to moderate that. Like,
Of course.
we can
Sure.
only talk about certain things at certain times or whatever the case may be. It's probably more mellow now than it was in the beginning. In the beginning, them guys, they would really kind of go at each other, but it's calmed down a little bit now. But the goal is that any athlete that needs that extra help to reach the goal, whether it be to play on a competition team, just to start, all district, all state, whatever they want.
Sure.
I want to try to provide an avenue for that.
That's a great goal, by the way. That is what everyone, right, should be going toward, right? But I think sometimes, not always, but sometimes, as I or self gets in the way, however you want to, whether it's a coach or whether it's a parent or whether it's whatever it is. But that's a great goal. That's tremendous.
Well, and I like how you talk about the facility, and they're just there getting pumped up. I mean, it sounds like, and that's, I mean, back in high school, it's been a while since I've been to the gym now to really lift and do stuff. Like back in high school, those were the, I mean, we didn't go, my buddy had a gym in his back, in his garage, and we'd go there throwing weights around, yelling whatever we wanted. I mean, that's the high octane environment that really gets you pumped up.
And I looked at it this way, and I could be wrong on how I'm seeing this. I could. But in a kid's life, a day-to-day life, how many hours are they themselves? Mm-hmm. There's somebody different for their teachers, or somebody different from their friends, or somebody different for social media.
Their parents.
Everybody plays into that, where maybe when I was younger, you had a lot more free time and a lot more range.
Right.
So you could be yourself a lot more.
And find yourself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And now it seems like that is shrinking because of technology, maybe.
Boy.
I don't know. So by keeping the gym somewhat unfiltered, trying to create an atmosphere where, hey, when you come in, I don't care.
It's an escape.
Yeah.
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 You know, you're gonna say some bad words. You're gonna listen to some stuff maybe I wouldn't listen to, but that's okay. This is about getting you where you want to go, and that if that's what it takes, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
Yeah, me too. So we're going to take a short commercial break here, and this commercial break is sponsored by Sonic.
Here at Butler Sonic, we strive to provide exceptional customer service. Using our friendly car hops, we provide delicious food and, of course, ice cold drinks. We are locally owned and operated and have been for over 40 years. We're honored to be part of the Bates County community. If you don't feel like cooking, come by your local Sonic here. We'll get you all taken care of. Live free, eat Sonic. And remember, the podcast is always better with the Sonic drink in your hand.
And welcome back from that commercial break. We also want to thank other sponsors, the Butler Chamber of Commerce, CNS Graphics, Emmanuel Baptist Church, and Prepcast. Thank you for sponsoring Tailgate TV.
Absolutely. We'll jump right back in as we still got a list of questions here. This is a big one, I think. What age should kids start training? When do you want kids in a gym, your gym, the gym, or even running laps, or just when should they start training?
You'll hit different people that say different things.
Sure.
But if you look at history, kids have always ran, jumped, played, went up trees. That's all training in its own way.
Absolutely.
But now all of a sudden we don't look at it as training, but it was.
Absolutely.
And they were lifting heavy stuff. They worked farms. They did everything that they had to do. Somewhere along the line, we decided that kids shouldn't be lifting weights when they're this young or that young. It'll stunt growth or whatever.
Right.
Well, I think the Russians kind of proved that to be false. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, the Russians were making a little mighty army over there and behind the Iron Curtain, and we just didn't know it.
Right.
Until we hit the Olympics, and all of a sudden,
Like,
where did this come from?
Yeah.
So while I'm not saying every kid should go lift weights, I think there's basic movement patterns that they should be learning young that you see now that aren't developed like they once were. The hinges and some of those things in the hips, the posterior chain, the ability to absorb force, jump. We're just not doing it like we used to. That can be started about any time.
Sure.
Now you want to start getting into heavy weights and things like that. Now we're starting to look at a little bit more of a maturity level and what can you handle. But as far as being scared of training, we've almost flipped it on its head too. Now we've got them playing competitive sports at a very young age. Well, that's still training. It just isn't a barbell. It's just they're swinging bats and doing all these things. So it's just finding the balance of what works for the kid and what he wants.
Absolutely. And even just conditioning training, as a kid. And you may not think of it that way, but like running around the block, playing hopscotch, riding your bike to your neighbor's house instead of, mom driving you or something like that. I mean, all that stuff is just being more active, anymore. We've got a lot of iPad kids, which, I mean, nothing necessarily against, but at some point, if you want to be active later in life, maybe start being active earlier in life.
You bring up a pretty interesting point there. And the more I'm around it, the more I notice it. The gap between your really dedicated kids and your kids that just want to play is growing so much that it's eventually going to have to force everybody, if you want to play, to move up into that realm of whether you like to train or not. You're going to have to find a place or it's going to leave you behind.
Yeah.
Interesting story when you were talking about that. I remember when I was a kid, I used to look up to Herschel Walker, Georgia running back, Heisman Trophy winner, played for the Cowboys, played for Minnesota. when he was younger, lived by the railroad tracks. And he was getting a little bit of teasing. They would call it bullying today, but whatever. Teasing about being a little chunky. So he started going out and racing the train as it would drive by his house, right? And then when he was watching TV, because his mom wouldn't let him out of the house much when she wasn't there, commercial would come on TV, he'd do push-ups until his show came back on. And then the next commercial break, he'd do set-ups until his show came back on. He still does push-ups and set-ups. He's 60 X number of years old, and I think he does over 1,000 push-ups a day. He does like 1,500 to 2,000 sit-ups a day. The guy looks like he could still play in the NFL. He is amazing at that stuff. And again, it's so important to get active and start doing what you're talking about. And again, he was just a young guy, started that, right? And boy, not that everybody's going to grow up to be a Herschel Walker, but I bet you Herschel Walker didn't know he was going to grow up to be a Herschel Walker either. You know what I'm saying?
You could throw Walter Payton into the same thing. People
right.
travel to Chicago to run up the hill that
He
Walter
did.
Payton ran.
Right.
So it's not in a gym,
Right.
but it's still training.
Yep.
Those hills, up the hills, down the hills, everything he
Right,
did. They didn't
right.
have a lot of money.
Right.
Gyms weren't as prevalent as they are now.
Correct.
They just found a way to make it work.
Yep.
They went to meat lockers and punched carcasses if you watched Rocky.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you get creative, and I think the most important thing, especially to start, is just being active.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
just start.
using your body.
Just
Just do
start.
something, whether it's in the commercial break. And I remember hearing that story when I was a kid, and I think I made it through one commercial, not a commercial break,
Right. Just
one
30
commercial.
second commercial.
And I was like, I guess I'm not going to be Herschel Walker. It's okay.
Amazing. But so, you know, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier about some of the kids you worked with, you know, and again, in us talking, there were some kiddos that you mentioned that you know, their names sparked my mind. I know the young lady from Sherwood that you worked with, and when we saw her freshman year, you could tell that young lady was going to do some great things, and then she just kept progressing. You could see it in her arms and her jumping ability. Her energy level was tremendous. But some of the people you've worked with,
Yeah, so Sadie, incredible athlete.
Sadie McCullough.
Sadie McCullough, yeah.
Yep.
I didn't have much interaction with her until early last summer.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
She'd already made her way.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody to think that I
Well,
had
I
anything to do with that. That was raw talent, and she put a lot of work in on her own. So,
Yeah, you could see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very athletic, very gifted. So she's been coming out pretty steady since early this summer.
Awesome.
So whatever effect I can hopefully have to help her is great. But yeah, she got all of her accolades on her own.
Wow, she's again, you could see it her freshman year when she played volleyball and basketball, and you were like, oh boy, this girl's going to be something else. And then again, she just kept progressing. And I was, you know, sometimes freshmen come in and seems like, especially on the girl side, right? And nothing against them. It's just, I think they progress quicker, obviously, than a lot of boys. Obviously, you know, the boys don't get to their peak till maybe their junior, senior year as far as high school is concerned. But she came in and I was like, wow, you know, if she stays this good her all 4 years, she didn't stay that good. She kept getting better. Mm-hmm. And that was really impressive. What is she doing?
We did stuff at
progressive.
the house to kind of, from this summer on, that's really all I can speak
Okay.
to. So she kind of ran the program we have.
Okay.
And I thought she did really well, but she went to Missouri State, and that
Okay.
coach down there, he's big into Olympic lifts and some of the things he's doing,
Okay.
and that really put some more on her.
Is she going to be playing a sport down there, I'm assuming?
Yeah, she's a heptathlete,
Okay.
which is a very, and we can get into that question because I know we
Wow.
had talked about it earlier. That's a very difficult sport to prepare for.
Right. Whoa. I can't imagine because there's so many things. I mean, you gotta have speed, you've got to have ability, like jumping ability,
Strength, you got to have endurance, you got to have, anaerobic capabilities.
That's crazy
It's everything is polar opposite of the next.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, whether it's throwing the shot,
And then you throw the javelin.
right, and then you go sprint, you
Right.
know, 110 meters
Yeah,
or
the
whatever it is.
110 hurdles, and then you got the 200,
Right.
and then they got the 800, and it's just like there's never a break in there. But so some of the kids that I've had a little longer, we can get into that, but it's kind of went in generations.
Okay.
Generationally is how I view it.
Okay, sure.
But the first couple to come out was Chandler Jacquino, Cole Ritter,
Okay.
my nephew Trevor Thompson, and then my daughter Casey Thompson. That was kind of the first group.
Gotcha.
And I was just looking for people to work out with.
Sure.
And I can remember one day we were in the gym, and it was like an upper body day.
Gotcha.
You never had to wait on Cole.
Okay.
Ever. He was right there ready to go as
Love
soon
it.
as you was done. Yeah, that's just the way he operated. Well, one day he was doing something. I'm like, "What are you doing, man?" He's like, "Well, I'm on a phone." I'm like, "Well, who are you talking to?" He's like, "Oh, talking to a coach." And I said, "Well, your comp coach, who are you talking to?"
Right.
He said, "Oh, no, Oregon State."
No kidding.
And it was in that moment that I realized, well, this is a game for me. It's not a game for them.
That's for sure.
This is his future right here. So if
Right.
I don't figure this out in a way to keep him safe but progressing, I'm doing him an injustice, and I need to find something else to do. So that was probably the most eye-opening experience I had with how serious it was.
Yeah.
So then from Cole, Michael McCoy come down. I think his sophomore year, he lost to the Holden kid, Dalen Green, down here at Butler. He was 113 pounds.
Okay.
He left his senior year. He wrestled. I want to say he wrestled 160. I could be wrong. But by the time it was all said and done, when he left, he was about 200.
Real.
When Cole left,
113
yeah,
to 200 pounds.
when Cole left for college, he was 194, 195.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just amazing to watch him grow.
Well, it doesn't that go to what you were talking about earlier about, hold back things because it stunts their growth. It didn't his.
No,
Right?
no, they didn't. No, they were ready to go. They were ready to
Yeah, that's
eat,
amazing.
lift, and get big. So
Well, and one of the things that sparked in my mind when you said that, I had a guy tell me one time when I was coaching my daughter in like 4th grade basketball, and that group of girls, and we were talking about travel basketball because I traveled with them around, and my main thing was I wanted them to learn how to play in other environments, how to play with bigger crowds, and maybe not everybody in the crowd's for you. You know what I mean? And because when you get to high school, you go into some rowdy places, right?
yeah, you do.
Whether it's Adrian coming to Butler or Butler Adrian or Eldo or wherever you're going, there are people that are happy when you don't do well. You know what I mean?
they're watching to see if it's your best game.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to travel to get kids kind of in that mindset of understanding that you can still do your best even when, mama is not the loudest, person yelling for
Right.
you or yelling at you. But I heard a fella said to me, he goes, well, I don't know why we would want to travel with these kids because nobody's going to make the WNBA or what. And I thought, but that's not my focus, right? My focus is to make them better. And to think, because I think people have kind of a small world, especially when you get to my age or older, a small world view. But when you have a young man, and not, I could say it's about Butler or wherever, I'll say it this way. A young man from Bates County, Missouri, getting talked to on the phone from somewhere in Oregon,
It's Oregon State. Yeah, so
University.
Right.
Yeah. How in the world do they find those kids, right? But there's people watching and paying attention because they want to find that young man, right?
Yeah, they want. Yeah, schools all over the country want a kid like
all
that.
over, right?
Yes.
And whether it's, back when I was a kid, in-state kids were who Missouri looked at. Kansas looked at Missouri, at Kansas and Missouri because
Right.
obviously close. But you didn't have a lot of like the Oklahomas or Texases coming up, or Missouri's going into Texas and things like that. It was kind of locally
Right.
No, not anymore.
No,
This
anymore,
is
it's-
national recruiting and national views of everyone because they want to find those kids.
And they're looking everywhere.
Oh,
and
everywhere.
with whether you agree with it or not, competitive sports has changed the landscape.
Absolutely right.
I really feel like when football falls to competitive sports, high school sports will totally take on a new image. I mean, you're getting recruited for baseball, softball, wrestling, volleyball, basketball, all through competitive sports.
Right.
Football is really the only sport left that you get recruited from your high school team.
Agreed. Yeah, that's right. Because, most of the time you're getting recruited off of if you're an AAU or if you're whatever. in basketball.
And that's what had helped Cole so much. His team had won a national title that year. It was COVID that year, like we talked about. They'd moved the Rocky Mountain National Invitational from Wyoming.
Right.
They'd moved it to Independence.
Right.
And he went up there and wrestled really well. He was already getting recruited. That wasn't the
of course.
straw that that kind of made it all happen, but that really helped. And then it just took off from there. I think that year,
Amazing.
the Stanford coach was talking to him first, and the Stanford coach had went to Oregon State. And if
I
I'm
see.
wrong, he'll let me know.
Sure.
But I want to say North Carolina was calling him, Wyoming was calling him. There was a school in South Carolina that was really after him. Maryville was kind of looking at him. And so he's dealing with all of this while he's trying to win a state title. The mental pressure that kid was under, and now he's an All-American.
Yeah, isn't that great? Good for that young man. Again, we talk about the mental toughness. Lifting weights helps you be mentally
It
tough.
definitely does.
Because you're going to go through times that those plateaus can be so devastating because you hit a number, right? And again, just throwing out a number, but you hit the 200 bench press, right? And you're like, because that's one of those
Right.
clicker offers, deals. You click that number off and you're like, okay, great. Now it's 225 or 250 or whatever the next number is. And you plateau at 200 and you stay there and you're like, I'm never going to get off this number. And then all of a sudden you go, boop, 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 boop. And it's really quick. It's kind of amazing.
While we're talking about kids, if there's a kid I forget, I am sorry. You're trying to pull it from your mind.
Of course.
But I know Adrian had a really good run that year in football, and kind of in between there, Aaron Yost, Sean Walsh, some of those guys started coming out, and they lost at state. Jens Griffith,
Right.
they'd lost at state. Well, it wasn't a week later after that loss. That gym was full of kids.
That's
Cooper
awesome.
Wimsett, Hunter Bailey, Ashton Wackerman, all of those guys started coming in.
That's great.
And it was a slow build to what they were able to do this year. And then what they were able to do this year, we had Adrian itself, I think, had 9 All-State kids, 8 or 9 All-State kids with the Offensive Player of the Year and the Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah. Well, 6 of those kids come to the gym.
That's awesome.
And so that was really cool to be a part of. And I want to say all district, they even did better than that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think so.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, and their football roster this year that you mentioned, I mean, that was pretty impressive. And I know that's kind of fresh in our minds just because it was such a big accomplishment to bring home a state title. But are there other kids, I guess, that you've worked with?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You take some of them monsters on that team. Hank
They were
Tenholder.
big.
Yeah.
They were big kids.
Bryler Ford really developed into a heck of a player. I mean, he put a lot of work in. Hank put a lot of work in. You had Ashton, Ian Yost. He really did a good job. They had him in some spots he hadn't played in. We had a senior, Gavin Sanders, who hadn't played football before. He started coming out this summer, and he ended up getting all district.
Wow. Good for him.
Bryson Jacobs, I don't know what you know about him, but he is just an unbelievable javelin thrower.
Really?
Wow.
He went down to Texas A&M this year for junior day.
Uh-huh.
He's been talking to Juan Garza about what the possibilities are to throw down there.
Wow.
He played football this year. He made all district. He had a really good season. Wyatt Jordan, he ended up hurting his shoulder early on in a wrestling tournament over the summer, but he put a ton of work in. He made all district as a junior. And just, Adam Compton, some of them younger guys really put the work in and started making strides to be, whether it be a better practice team player or to get more time on the field. They just put so much effort into it, and they were there every time the gym was open.
Sure.
They were there.
Well, and again, I when I say this, I'm not talking about Adrian. I'm just talking about our county. Okay. When you are in a smaller school, the chances of having a humongous senior class are, I mean, they're going to happen, but it's once every 10 years maybe, right? Where you could really depend on some of those heavy senior classes. Butler had that 5 years ago. We had a really good senior class, and those kids
Miller
moved through
and Beckley and
those boys, and a good run. But then you go through and pick a sport. Seniors on a basketball team, you may have one or two, maybe three, right? It's those younger kids that make all the difference. Not only, as you mentioned, not only being better practice players to help the seniors and the juniors get good reps in practice, because that makes you a better football team overall, or whatever sport, but also that there's always a hole. Younger, like freshmen and sophomores sometimes, and I know, again, a lot of schools that have this issue, they don't go out for football. Well, I'm not going to play much anyway. How do you know? Mm-hmm. Right? If you're working hard off season, there's a hole there that a coach would love to stick you in because he needs help there. But if you're not there, he can't put you in. So go out, right? Put in the work and then go out and see what happens. You never know. You could be all district, you could be all state, you could win state titles by getting yourself on the field.
Yeah, just go and play. It seems like, the last few years there's really been a war on football, and you're seeing an attrition in numbers.
Correct.
And there's other factors that play into that.
Sure.
Kids are finding their sports and they're gravitating to those instead of football.
Yes.
Things like that. The high school's not the hub like it used to be.
Correct.
Now they can go out, pursue other interests out in the world. So it's obviously changed the dynamic. So they need players.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put in a little extra and just see where it ends up.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's a important thing to do. Just get out there.
And then when you see their success, then that brings more. And like I said, I know I've left off quite a few kids, but you look at some of them, the talent that's went through Adrian and it's kind of come to the gym. I've yet to see too many kids as strong as Jens Griffith was. I mean, I don't know how he did some of the things he did and to be as athletic as he was. And I took a bunch of kids to a meet last April, and they just did an amazing job powerlifting. And it was pretty cool to see, that all that time in the gym, they could go and compete in that.
Right.
And have some success.
To know they're building up to something.
Right. Bryce Shalufis, he was another kid in the gym. He was I think he was the WEMO Conference Player of the Year his senior year.
Wow.
I think we've had 4 Conference Players of the Year.
Wow.
Last time I checked, and I'm going to be way off now because we added 6 this year. I think we were...
Isn't it great to add those kind of numbers, right?
I think we were just under 20 All-State kids.
Wow. That's impressive.
Well, and again, it goes to show that if you put in the time, you put in the effort, you put in the work, it pays off.
It pays off.
And that's a short-term thing, right?
Yeah.
Think about your life, right? That those work ethics, right?
Yep.
Get in there and do it, right? Work hard at it. Those things pay off, whether you're talking about lifting weights or you're talking about
they're applicable to
so many things, right?
many situations in adulthood. Even
Absolutely.
As you move on and transfer, from high school to the real world. I mean, that work ethic that you're learning is applicable. And not even just the work ethic you're learning, the fitness that you're getting, and
Certainly helps.
How you're taking care of your body will translate too.
And you have goal setting that goes along with there, and then being patient for the end result, and it's not going to happen overnight, and watching a progression, building something. There's a lot of aspects of just preparing for what you want to do that carries over to life for sure.
Absolutely.
I like that you talk about the slow build, just because, we've already talked about a little bit of culture change, just when, the activity level of kids in the past versus now. But you look at like the instant gratification. I think that kind of deters some people from taking care of their bodies is, I went to the gym for 2 weeks and didn't see any results, so I'm done with this. And, learning that this is a slow build and this is a slow process, but it pays off. I mean, that's pretty helpful to learn.
Yes, and it's going to take time. Mm-hmm. You can't buy it. You can't get it from Amazon. You have to be in the gym, in the squat rack.
How much you want to.
Right. No matter how much you want to. The supplements and all that stuff, while the supplements may help, they're not that's not what does it.
No, they help
They
alongside.
help along. They call them supplements for a reason. There's
Right.
no magic potion other than being in there every day and doing what you have to do.
I mean, it's funny you bring that up because I just, me and my wife and my brother, we just recently started going back to the gym. Like, sick of this. I hit 30 this year, and I'm like, I want to be in better shape. And so we started going back, and I was looking at some of the protein and workout powders and stuff that my brother was all using, and I'm like, look at how many carbs is in this. Look at how much calories are. That's not meant to just take that and then boost you up. That's meant to take that, then hit the weights, then it'll boost you up. Otherwise, you're just adding fat to yourself.
Well, and then you better have a good diet on top of that
Absolutely.
with a complete protein. And that's just to get those extras, because if, like, let's say you're going to take a kid and you're going to figure his weight, it's technically off kilograms, 1 gram per every kilogram. We typically do it just off pounds. Obviously, there's a little bit of a difference, but you take a 180-pound kid, he's going to need somewhere around 180 grams of protein, maybe a little less, somewhere in that range a day, especially the way they're growing. Well, how much chicken, beef, how much can you eat? 180 grams of protein is a lot of protein.
Well, I mean, I can eat a lot. I don't know about them, but
so they, hitting that extra, that's what makes it a supplement. Is at the end of the day, you're 30 grams short. You can hit a shake, but if you're relying on that, you're going to fall behind.
and if you're relying on that and little workout or little gym time, it's not going to get the results you want.
It's just like eating any other food.
Right.
It's just going to go places you don't want it to go.
That's kind of leading us, I guess, to how do you set up the right program for somebody, and along with that, how do you make the diet and exercise work together?
All right, so there's a few different things there. What I found through the years is the program has evolved from where we started originally to where we are now. We've dropped some stuff, we brought some other stuff in. We've got better technology, so we're tracking things better. But most kids walk in about the same. They're going to walk in the same weaknesses, so where you want to target. The posterior chain is going to be pretty weak. They're going to have pretty weak hamstrings. They're going to have pretty weak lower back. Anymore, you were talking about iPad kids. You're starting to get a rounded upper back, and it's not opened up, so then you get a retracted shoulders. So you need to start fixing that.
Right.
Then you start developing technique. The hip hinge isn't quite where it may have used to have been, so you got to start building that. And then overall work capacity. So when they come in, we know where we want to be. And I think it's out there. But there's a work triangle that Al Vermeil came up with. That was the name I was looking for when I was stumbling around. So it's the hierarchy of athletic needs. And so if you take every sport and you put it in that pyramid, for the Adrian guys, the peak of the pyramid would be the state title.
Right.
The bottom of the pyramid is the base of where you start. So you want to work to the peak.
Absolutely.
So the bottom of the pyramid is your base, which is your GPP, your general workout, your work capacity, your ability to handle volume. Then you got strength. Then you move up into power, and then you kind of move up into speed and explosiveness. Well, we do they call it a conjugate. You're working all of those traits simultaneously. At different times of the season, each one takes a different precedence. So right now, I've got guys that are prepping to throw in track.
Sure.
If I got them at a peak now, we're in trouble.
Sure.
So right now, it's all about work capacity and strength. And then power and speed, while we still hit, that's not our focus. For football, it was the same way. Then as we come up and we're watching them, strength and power start becoming more of the focus. They're getting their work capacity from practice. We've already established a good base. What they're doing in their sports, taking care of that. Still touching on speed, still touching on a little bit of capacity, but now it's strength and power. Then as you start getting, for the guys that were out, we start getting a little closer to the end. We're starting to get into districts. We reduced the range of motion and we loaded them up. You can lift heavier weights in a smaller range of motion.
Sure.
We started doing that because now we're starting to look at power.
Right.
Power and speed. They're strong, but now we need power and speed. We need them to be explosive on the field. We kind of work through that element, starting to build into where we want to be at the end for the state game and a couple of those right in there between that. Then we drop the volume completely out and we just hook bands on. on the bars, and we just get them moving the bar as fast as they possibly can. We get them jumping as high as they possibly can. Let them take that to the field, and then they looked how they looked. Now,
Which was impressive.
which, you can't take credit for all of that, as much as I would love to. But the guys
Well,
I was watching, I really thought it had good carryover.
Something was going right, and I definitely
then
think that
they
plays
had
a part in it.
unbelievable coaches and all that. So
Sure,
I
of course.
sure don't want
Well,
to step on toes. But
It's certainly
takes-
a pie, right? Every
Right.
piece goes together to make the whole thing.
yeah, you
right?
got everybody trying to make 1% better until you get
right
to the hole.
right.
Well, once that's over, you've hit your peak, and now the triangle flips back over, and you're starting over to your next season. And you could look at that through the summer too. You're trying to build them to a peak where they can start hitting 2-a-days in practice, and then it kind of starts over, and then you
Sure.
start to progress again because they're not ready for that volume most of the time when 2-a-days hit. I don't even think 2-a-days are a thing anymore, but when
Right,
they were,
right,
they're
right.
not really ready for that volume and that hitting, so you're building to that peak. Colleges really do a very good job of that.
Right.
Then you start over. And so you're always looking to where you're building, and you're always trying to keep track of the progress. And they do an incredible amount. We do it very low tech. They all have a notebook. They all have their name on the notebook.
That's important.
They all write down the workout every day, and they keep track of every PR. So let's say we're testing vertical jumps, and I say, hey, what's your vertical jump? Well, most of the time they don't even need to look at their book,
of course.
but they'll, some of our bigger jumpers like Jackson Cass from Archie, just an incredible twitchy kid. I mean, he can just hop. You're looking at over a 40-inch vertical on that kid.
That's impressive.
Well, he knows exactly what his
I bet
vertical
he
is.
does.
He
Yeah.
don't even need to look in his book.
Right.
We use OVR, and the guy that kind of come up with the idea, he was the director of West Side versus the World, and I kind of got to be friends with him. So we were talking about it, and he told me it's 11% lower than a Vertec. So a Vertec is like the sticks when they jump up.
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
touch
yeah,
the sticks.
sure.
So he said it's going to be 11 inches lower. So Vertec's a pretty good judge of a vertical leap, because if you can't reach it, you can't count it.
Right.
So you figure a kid like that's jumping on a one step in on the OVR 38 inches. Well, you can give him another 10% right off the top. So now he's jumping almost 4 more inches on top of that. 42-inch vertical as a junior.
That's a lot.
He's up there.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot.
The one thing about tracking all
Again.
that stuff is if you want to motivate a kid, boy, girl, it doesn't matter. Let them know what their numbers are.
Mm-hmm.
Don't.
Show them that progress that they're
Yes.
making too, and then once you get
Well, it's dangling a carrot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it really is.
It is. And then you have to figure out how to explain to them some days when it's not optimal. And then
Right.
that opens up new conversations. Well, what's your food been like? What's school been like? How much rest have you been getting? How much water have you been getting?
Boy, rest so important, right?
Yes,
Rest, hydration, so important.
It makes a huge difference. When are you getting to bed? And then there's other things we do. We do some recovery methods that try to help improve. But yeah, you can't beat rest.
Really, I mean, your body needs it. Your body's designed that. Boy, that the rest that you get so helps so many things. Whether it's mental, because I know if I've had a short time sleep and I wake up and my head is foggy, I have a headache, my day does not go according to what I would like it to, because I'm kind of in a haze all the time. Well, and when you're putting in so much effort to work out and things like that, like these young men and young ladies are doing, that rest is so important to help your body recover and gain that strength back.
And it gets taken for granted, but we use KPIs. So, we got indicators on where they're feeling, how they're feeling. And vertical jump is a very good one.
Sure.
So when they come in, hey, how was the game? Whatever it is they're playing, how's practice been? Oh, we're tired. Okay, well, let's jump.
Right.
We'll just jump right out of the gate. Well, if I know what your vertical is, if we have a 3% decrease in vertical, I'm starting to worry. If we have a 5% decrease in vertical, just hit the warm-ups and go home.
Yep.
You're done.
Yep.
We got to get you back up to where you're close on your vertical. Otherwise, this is all pointless. And we're just, for everything you do, I think Jim Wendler talked about this. For everything you do, as far as practice, gym, school, you're digging a hole. And if you're not putting the dirt back in the hole as you're digging out the hole,
You go backward.
before too long, you're gonna be where you can't get out.
Yeah, you're backward.
And
yeah.
That's why I routinely schedule my naps
Oh, here
that
we
you
go.
get on me all the time about.
Again, these
the best
people
part of
are
my
doing
work.
stuff, and they earn a nap. You got to earn naps.
Best
They're
part of
not
my
giving-
workout routine is
Well,
the nap.
well, the one he doesn't miss.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes that has to be. I know coaches that have just said, hey, you know, they shut their weights class down. Hey, take a nap.
Yeah.
I had a coach down in Enterprise, Alabama, I was talking to a while back, and he started noticing they keep so good a track of it. He started noticing that they had, I want to say, like AP chemistry or something on basketball days.
Oh, yeah.
That's when the class fell. Well, their vertical jumps were down because the class was so stressful. It was
Draining.
dragging their CNS down, and they had to kind of right the ship
Right.
and move. We couldn't move the games, but they ended
Right.
up moving the class because it does make that big of a difference.
It's crazy. Well, again, your mind, right? Your mind is such an amazing thing. Because I used to tell the kids when I've coached them is whatever you think, that's what it's going to be. If you think you're going to lose, you're going to lose, right?
Yeah,
if you think you're going to win,
self-fulfilling
right? Exactly. And if you think you're not good or you think you can't lift something, you're probably not going to be able to do it, right? So that your mind is so powerful. And if you think about things and are progressing in a positive manner, like you're talking about that class, I would have been stressed walking in the door of that class, let alone having to sit through it. So yeah, I mean that affects you so many times, right?
And we overlook it, but if it wasn't real, colleges, pros, the Olympians would not spend the millions of dollars a year they spend on sports psychology.
That's
If
exactly
it was,
right.
if there wasn't something to it, it would have went away a long time ago.
Yes, and whether it's Tiger Woods, right? He took shots, and I always and I'm
Favorite golfer, isn't it?
not my favorite, but that's all right. I like golf. I enjoy golf. But I guarantee you, if you don't think you can do it,
Oh, you're never going to do it.
oh, and I always think it's funny that most of the highlights you see from people like Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson and some of those other guys are because they hit a bad shot the shot before, right? They're not in the middle of fairway and hitting it to a green, right? They're having to carve it around a tree or whatever. Well, those guys hand-eye coordination and things like that, but they believe, right? Or they wouldn't even try.
They wouldn't even try.
Yeah, and look at how many times they pull it off. That's what's amazing.
More times than not.
Yes, that's why they're great, right?
When my daughters were little, we got very fortunate, and somehow I had managed to meet Christy Ambrosi. She was up in Johnson County. She played at UCLA,
Right,
and then she played on the softball team that won gold in Sydney.
right.
She come down and did clinics. I didn't even realize this stuff existed until she started talking about the books that they give them and what to read and what to put in your head and flushing mistakes and all these different things. Well, then that led to other psychology books.
Sure.
And then now you can kind of, well, especially when you see a kid going through it, you need to be able to help them.
Absolutely.
You know, when you got a kid on the way to state and it's just dragging them down, how do you help them through that? And it's not the weights,
Right.
You know, some days you got to say, just leave the weights alone.
That's right.
Let's go find something else to do.
Yep. Get their mind off of
Yeah.
it. Yep.
It's gonna be what it is, but I can either bury you with weights or we can go try to get some of the weight off somehow.
Sure. Sure.
And I think if it wasn't
Crazy.
for that time with Christy, I may not have figured that out, or I would have figured it out way too
Well.
late. Lord knows I made enough mistakes as it was.
I
You know,
understand.
maturity does a lot for the way you view
it certainly
things.
does. It certainly and those people that have been through it, right? Them passing that down, right? That's first of all, it's great that they're doing that, but it's so important that they do that to people like you who can then pass it down again, right? Because there's no sense in reinventing the light bulb, right? That guy passed it down to the next one, you know, and it just kept going, and now we've got LEDs and all this other stuff. But you know, sports. But I've heard so many people talk about that. It's the 6 inches between your ears that make the biggest difference in everything that you do.
Now, while we're talking about this, we were talking about the front side of it, the front
Sure.
side of sports psychology.
Right.
Now football's over for a lot of these seniors. Basketball is going to be, volleyball is over for a lot of seniors.
Right.
Now what?
Right.
I think we do an amazing, and Adam Feet was on the podcast a while back, and he's back east, and he's a sports psychologist on top of a CSCS, so he trains, and he's really starting to bring that to the forefront. What do we do now? You've built them up since they were 8, 10 years old, and they had a goal, they had a direction that they were working towards. Well, that, as the last seconds roll off the clock of whatever game they're playing,
Right.
now what? There's no offloading
Right.
procedure.
Right.
It's like, oh, you're done.
Right.
You know, the real world awaits you. Well, it's really not fair to a 17, 18-year-old mind that there is nothing on the other side of this
Right. That's
that
difficult.
I've worked so hard for.
Right.
So I don't know that I have the answer for that yet, but I'm starting to look at that a little more so we can start talking about it before the end of the season. Like, hey, you know, we start getting our goals set for what happens after this. So
And
we
the
know where we're going.
CSCS he was referring to was certified strength conditioning deal. So that's those, again, another one of those things that millions of dollars are put in to people and classes and that kind of thing to help young people achieve their goals. Right?
Yes, and then
That's
help
amazing.
them once that's done.
Right.
To
right.
you know, to go ahead and carry on with their lives and figure out what it is they want to do. A lot of pressure steeped on kids to know what they want to do at such a young age. Well,
Right.
I'm 45 and I still don't know what I want to do.
Right. I'm with you. I understand. I get, and you touched on this a lot in that last little question that Cody had, but you know, girls and boys, as much as you hear today about how similar they are different. Their bodies are structured differently, things of that nature. What do you feel like, and you talked about a little bit about like hamstrings, lower back not being as, maybe that's, they all have that same issue coming in, boys and girls, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And then, but so where do you feel like that the boys and girls should start with getting stronger in those two areas? If we're just talking about those two areas being the weakest, where should they start?
All right. So before I dig into that, let me back up just a little bit. I really believe the female athlete is the most underserved athlete in the community.
Agreed.
Strength and conditioning is based around the football program. Typically, it's a football coach. The female athletes get ran in and they do something subpar to what
Right.
the male athlete does. And then I feel like they get over conditioned because people don't know what to do with them.
Gotcha.
We're just going to run,
Sure.
a mile test for a sport that you never run a mile in.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I don't. You're in a sport that involves 5-second bursts of speed and power. Yet you're going to train like a cross country runner. I don't quite understand that.
Sure.
But it happens.
Sure.
It happens all across the nation.
Yes.
So understand the sport demands for both. The girls have the same thing on the line the boys have.
Mm-hmm.
They have the same dreams the boys have. It's just separated by sex.
Right. Right.
You know, however school. I know that's changing now, but
Yes.
where we're at now, that's pretty much the dividing line.
Mm-hmm.
The strength needs are pretty much the same.
Okay.
I don't know that the girls are going to be able to handle, obviously, the loads,
Sure.
but they are strong. They're very strong.
Yes.
So to develop some of that stuff, like we talked about, it's very, very, very similar. We have we use a reverse hyper for the low back and the hamstrings. We'll use a low back hyper extension, glute ham developer. So we're really hitting that hard. As far as lifts go, we do a lot of box squats.
We talked about that yesterday. How important boxes are, as simple as they are, so effective.
And then you can coach that form. And a lot of kids you get in there, they don't have the hamstrings to let them get down in the hole.
Right.
Or they don't have the mobility to get down there.
Right.
You can set a box up. You can really adjust.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you can also do is you break up the eccentric concentric chain. So you're building explosion out. There's no stretch. Well, there is a stretch reflex, but it's not
Sure.
the same in a box when you sit down.
Right.
So you have that. Athletically, I think it carries over very well. Plus, if they're going to free squat at school.
Right.
So why double up
Right.
too much?
Gotcha.
We also do a lot of pulls. We do a lot of deadlifts.
Yeah.
And I think I think that served them very well. And then we sumo pull, so that's a very wide stance.
Okay.
Because it develops a little bit more of the hip.
Right.
And it doesn't get into the Olympic movements as much. So if you're wanting to teach a power clean or you're wanting to teach a snatch or whatever the case may be,
Right.
you're not trying to differentiate what a good deadlift is and what a good clean is.
I'm with you.
So for us, those are kind of the staples of building that backside. And then we do tons of jumps. And then for whatever chest movement we do, I try to program 2 back movements.
Okay.
Because your back is so important in the bench press. And it's important in the squat and it's important in the deadlift.
Absolutely.
It just needs to get hit as many times as possible. A lot of kids avoid it, but we do a lot of pull-ups.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sometimes the simple stuff is what you need. We try to develop the triceps. If you really want a good lineman and a good bench presser, they better have some triceps on the back of their arms.
A lot of kids, they only want to work their bicep because that's what everybody sees, right?
Right.
But it's the back, the core, they talk about all the time, obviously, are the things that really make the biggest difference. Maybe not visually, but the biggest difference when
And there's
you're
even
really
an
doing
argument
something.
there. I believe
Well-
I believe the triceps is 2/3 of the size of
I agree.
your arm.
Yeah,
so the
right.
bigger that tricep
Right.
gets, the bigger your arm's going
Sure,
to look.
sure.
And plus, everybody wants a horseshoe on the back of their arm when they're at
Absolutely.
the pool or they're playing basketball or they're wrestling.
Right.
Because Jim Windler talked about this also. There is a battle of the bus. And
Oh,
when a kid walks on the mat, a wrestler walks on the mat,
you can win or lose
you
right
can
there.
win or lose right there. Because when let's take Hank Tentholder, for example.
Sure.
This is his first year wrestling.
Yep.
But when you see him walk on the mat, you're going to have to rethink your life real quick.
Right.
You know
right.
what I mean?
Right.
Was this a good decision?
Sure.
So, and not to neglect the girls, because like Harley Newkirk and Riley Essen Price, some of those girls come out when Harley went to state golf,
Right.
She had thighs on her from squatting, and those
Right.
girls see that, and
It's intimidating.
yes.
It's very
That
intimidating.
goes back to the mental that we talk
Right.
about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to be able to overcome that,
Right.
and not everybody can.
Yeah.
The football, when you walk the field or when you hop off the bus and you just see one jack kid after another,
Yeah.
how are you going to be able to hang with them?
Right. Right. It is. It's intimidating. I remember, well, and young man that we had on the podcast, the name escapes me, but wrestler, 2-time state champion.
Brendan Patrick.
Brendan.
Thank you, Brendan Patrick. That young man, obviously, nice physique, in shape, all that stuff. Not necessarily physically intimidating, but then you look down his record
Right.
and you go, holy moly.
I'm not going to beat this
Oh
kid.
no, and that's intimidating as well because, like you say, those numbers. When my son wrestled, he looked at the kids. He was
They
gonna
know
have to
who they're
wrestle.
wrestling.
Yeah, and their numbers and that kind of thing, and that's intimidating as well. Yeah, very intimidating. So, but yeah, it's very good stuff.
And to get kind of back to your question on what they need. So what I've noticed in the last few years is most kids are strength-based kids, not twitchy kids. And you need that
Agreed.
balance. Like we talked about Jackson Cash, I would consider him pretty twitchy. His ability to jump, hop, leap, broad jump is unparalleled. I have a few others, but they're a rarity. So when you bring them in, let's say we're doing some depth drops off of a box. Well, the lower the box, the harder it is for them to recover to jump.
Gotcha.
But your twitchy kids have no problem.
Right.
They can hit it.
Sure.
But as you go up in box height, your strength kids are able to overcome them forces better than your twitchy kids.
Sure.
So you have to figure
Makes
out how to
sense.
make that balance.
Right.
So I want to say we were in there a couple nights ago and you got a kid like Bryler Ford. You would not consider him twitchy. He's just a big, strong kid. But we were doing depth drops into a broad jump. And I want to say he was up there in the high 90s from the depth
Wow. That's impressive.
and looked athletic.
Right.
It's like that shouldn't be.
Right.
But if you let that go, you would never develop that. He would just be strong and then he wouldn't have the explosiveness he needs to do what he needs to do.
Right.
It's keeping everything in a balance.
So important.
Yeah, your twitchy kids, they may not be as strong, so you need to get them strong.
Sure.
And then we'll work through that and see where they're at and try to bring them up equally. There's always the question on 1 rep max and how heavy the weight goes.
Sure.
And all that, which I don't want to see a kid fail. I want to see them hit the rep. But the more you do this, they have to get into that heavier weight for a few different reasons.
Sure.
You've got to know where their sticking point is so that you can improve that. If they're coming off a box and their sticking point's an inch off the box, well, you know they're weak coming out of the hole. Well, some of them might be, their sticking point might be 3 or 4 inches up.
Right.
Well, their vertical jump's going to suffer if you don't fix that.
Right.
Because that's where the vertical jump takes over. So you got to load them up enough to slow the lift down so that you can start helping them.
It's amazing because, again, I'm old, so I'll say this.
No.
When I was younger, everything that you're saying, nobody worried about. They were like, how much can you bench press? How much can you squat? How much can you deadlift? How much can you, military press, whatever. But it's amazing how far. And again, they might have worried about that. Like you're talking about, the Russians might have been worried about that kind of stuff, right? Americans weren't necessarily worried about that stuff. It was all power and all that stuff. And, what's your vertical? Well, that was for the basketball players. Football players didn't worry about vertical. I never had one coach ever say, let's go in here and
See what your
jump up the
vertical is.
wall.
Right.
Never. But I think it's so important that as you talk about balance, that your basketball kids can get better by being stronger.
Right, definitely.
And your football kids can be better if they have a vertical and they work on their other things to make them more balanced.
And it's direct relation to speed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The bigger your vertical jump, you should be able to be,
right?
you should be better in your max effort speed. The better your broad jump is, you should be better in the acceleration part of the race. The other reason why we do go a little bit heavy, and before I forget about it, I was wanting to hit on it. So I posted a video of Aubrey McCullough. So that would be Sadie's sister.
Yes,
she was out the other day. She pulled a huge deadlift the other night. Awesome. But as you watch the video, you can see that weight pulls her forward, just a little pulls her out of the groove.
Uh-huh.
When we get that fixed, she's going to blow up, and she's at, I don't even know what she wrestles. I bet it's 130-ish.
Probably.
She was pulling 225 the other day, which is a huge pull. Wow. I don't feel like 300's that far away from her.
Really?
Once
Wow.
that technique's right.
That's amazing.
But you got to get heavy enough to see the flaws in the technique without putting someone in danger.
In risk, yeah, sure.
A lot of the bench presses, a lot of that stuff, them kids, they don't miss because they're not strong enough. They miss because they get out of the groove.
Right.
So you have to get it heavy enough to teach them where the groove is so that they can lift those bigger weights.
Yeah, it's amazing. And again, it's so listen to you talk about it, it's so much more technical than in my mind it used to be, right? Because again, before it was, there's the weights, go see if you can lift it, and coaches didn't necessarily worry about standing to the side of you to see if your back was this way or
where your position was, what the bar pass doing.
Exactly.
And now we use
so important.
Yeah, and now with technology, we have a little VBT, so velocity based training is what they call it, but it's reading bar speed.
Uh-huh.
So the way we work it, we have a strength day and a dynamic day. So the strength day, we're moving heavy weight slow.
Right.
Dynamic day, we're moving a lighter weight fast. So
right.
I can tell them, without getting too in depth and losing everybody that's listening, we run kind of a Bondarchuk system, which he was from the Russian ideology. Right. So on our dynamic day, I had them find a weight that was at a certain speed. I wanted them to be at like 0.6 on their squat.
Okay.
0.6 meters per second.
Yeah.
We stay at that weight on dynamic day until it reaches a 0.85.
Okay.
Then we'll add chains or whatever and slow it back down to a 0.6. Thinking about that triangle that we were talking about earlier, when can I make them peak?
Right.
When I need to. So we're always monitoring what that speed's doing. Wow. Now, strength days, we just lift.
Right.
But dynamic days. And so we'll put it on we don't clean, we'll high pull.
Gotcha.
We'll put it on a high pull. Hey, I want you pulling your high pull 0.8. Starting, find that weight, and then we won't stop until we're up over 1 meters per second. So then we can start looking at all that and say, okay, now we're getting somewhere.
That's amazing stuff.
Yeah, and then, our vertical jumps, we'll set them up like we were talking ground contact times, depth drops. We'll set it up like on RSI mode so we can see what their ground contact time is versus their vertical. So when they hit the ground, are they at 0.3 seconds? Are they at 0.5 seconds? How long is it taking them to reverse that jump?
Right.
And then how high are they getting? So then they know where they're at. What can we improve? We'll look at ground. I like it we have timers for the track stuff, but
Sure.
we'll set up like hurdle hops.
Right.
And we'll set those timers in there, and we want a ground contact time of 0.15 between the hurdles. And then once they reach that, we'll go up in height.
Really?
0.15, you're flat moving.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't put them any higher.
For the boys, they're on 9-foot centers, and they're about 12 inches off the ground. So why it doesn't sound insane, if you look out there and you got 9-foot centers you got to cover,
Yeah,
and you're shooting for 0.15,
you're moving.
you better get going.
Yeah, you're moving.
So
That's impressive.
anytime we have coaches on and anybody that does strength and conditioning or training, we like to ask and talk a little bit about off-season training, which I feel like we've talked about a little bit already. But I mean, the importance of that. I mean, I feel like there's kids that, okay, I'm out of season. I'll practice will start back up in a couple months, and I'll go to practice, but I'm going to enjoy my time off. Which, I mean, we've talked about rest. Rest is a good thing. But doing something in that off season, what do you see that can be transformed into off season?
That's your time. During the season, you've lost the window. Those guys that are getting ready, and girls that are getting ready for track, they're getting ready for track now. Mm-hmm. So that when we get there, they're prepared. They're throwing med balls. They're getting all the things ready for their throws, their sprints, whatever the case may be. It's a little cold to get out and sprint too much, but we do everything we can to try to have them prepared. Well, if you wait until the first week of track, you've lost. Now, I understand there's basketball players or stuff like that. They can't.
Sure.
You're trying to balance two sports, so
Sure.
that's a totally different conversation. But during the summer, if you're not playing sports and you're just waiting for football to start, well, somebody's
working out.
doing it,
Yeah.
and you're going to meet them,
Yep.
and you may not like the outcome.
Absolutely.
So that's the time that all the heavy work gets done. Once season starts, you got to back off that. You can't be in there finding how strong you are all the time. You got to start working up that triangle. So in the summers, when you're at the bottom of that triangle, work capacity, work strength. You want to lift heavy weights, that's your time. You want to work on your acceleration. You want to get faster, that's your time.
I remember back when Nebraska was, if not the elite program in the nation, it was really high up there. Coach Osborne was there. And I always remember them talking about, the announcers would talk about, well, they got those farm boys, they brought in there for their offensive line. And I was like, well, they were bucking bales of hay all summer, right? They were doing things to get stronger where maybe some of the other kids were maybe hanging out at the beach or, not really progressing. Not that bucking bales of hay is what you're talking about, but those kids were getting stronger. They were working over the summer. So when football season got there, they were already stouter than the kids that just showed up. Like you were talking about, hell, 2-a-day starts, here we go, right? They were already ready. And that's what you're talking about only in today's thing. Because now, all the farm kids go and back up a truck and stick a stinger into the bale of hay and draw it out there. There's no bucking the bales as much as they used to be. But I think that's important, right?
Well, yeah.
It's a so big deal.
So I don't know if you knew it or not, but you're kind of getting in my wheelhouse now. So
Okay.
I'm a huge Cornhusker fan.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, great.
So it actually goes back to Devaney.
Okay.
Devaney hired Boyd Epley on Tom Osborne's recommendation.
Okay.
So Nebraska had the first strength coach on staff.
And that it was legendary.
Yeah, Husker Power.
Yes,
yeah.
legendary.
Metabolic circuits, everything that
Yes.
they did, ground-based training. Boyd Epley went on to help found the NSCA.
Okay.
I mean, he's still a legend in Nebraska, and you can get in the Big 8 days, and the things they were doing, they were so far ahead of their time. It was
So far.
insane.
Yes.
And obviously people caught up, and then you get
Sure.
into West Side ideas and things like that. But when Devaney hired Boyd, he said, we'll do this, we'll try this, but if you make one of my guys slower, you're fired. And
How long was he there?
yeah.
Right.
Well, he wrote his own ticket.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
and
sure.
his books are amazing.
Sure.
I have quite a few of them at home and read a lot of his stuff. Now, they've adapted and changed, and they've kind of moved away from some of that Husker Power stuff.
Sure.
And Boyd Epley was one of those guys that he would go throughout the Big 8 at that time and he would tell those coaches. It wasn't a secret what they were doing. It
Sure.
was just a slow adaptation that the rest of the schools had for it.
Right.
And what they put on the field was just, you look back at some of them backs, and even their quarterbacks, they'd run you over. Their punter'd run you over.
Yeah, well, I remember they had a lineman there, and I cannot remember his name. It was kind of a it started with an N. I cannot remember this guy's name, and it kind of a longer name. And that guy was an absolute animal. I mean, he made watching TV, you almost hurt for the kid he was blocking, because you were like, oh my goodness, he would just devastate people across the line. And you're talking about full-grown young men out there that he is making look silly.
Yeah, and they brought them guys off 8-man teams.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Small schools.
Oh.
It wasn't all huge schools back then.
Well,
and they
again,
just
Nebraska,
they got them there and they developed them. You look
Yeah.
back at I want to say it was the '94 national championship game against Miami, and that was the Brooke Behringer year.
Right.
Tommy Frazier had blood clots and all that. Just an incredible year. But Joel Makovica, kind of like Mike Allstott,
right?
just was running guys over. They all had the half shirts. And,
Right, exactly.
That was
Yep,
when
yep.
football was probably in its prime.
It was fun to watch. It sure was. That was an amazing teams they had. And again, I think a lot of Coach Osborne. I respect him a great deal. I think he was a great man and did a lot of great things up there. But Nebraska saw, and again, we all should be thankful that Nebraska saw a need, and then
it changed the game
completely. Because you look at those young men now. I mean, even in high school, you see those young men, and they are specimens. I mean, they are amazing looking young men. And then obviously, the look obviously is one thing, but when we see some of the kids that come, because I do the radio or the prepcast, and you see some of those kids come in, you're like, holy moly. Those kids are monsters. They're just
in most cases they had to do a lot to get there.
Yeah, absolutely, and you appreciate the work that went into doing what they're doing, and it's a great thing.
On that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break and be back with more questions with Stephen Thompson. I created CNS Graphics over 5 years ago in an effort to bring people stunning designs and quality materials. We're a small, local graphic design company with a big dream, and we offer free shipping outside of Bates County on all of our printed materials. We love to create banners, business cards, car magnets, window decals, flyers, and much more. Basically, if Vistaprint can do it, so can we, and all at competitive prices. We pride ourselves in creating cool and stylish graphics and offering top-of-the-line customer service to all of our clients. Reach out to us today and see what we can start creating for you. You can call me, Cody, at 479-385-1120, or message us on Facebook. And remember, your graphics deserve to be cool and stylish. Welcome back. We're going to have some more questions here with Stephen Thompson. But before we do, want to thank Sonic. As we always say, the podcast just sounds better with the drink in your hand. O3 Customs, who is the official hat sponsor of Tailgate TV, Mid-America Live, your best source of local news, and Whiskey Mansion Rant's a great place to have any event. I think they specialize in weddings, but do all kinds of things. So I'd like to thank those folks.
Yeah, do all kinds of stuff out there. So, we've talked about lifting and things like that, and we talked about Sadie being down there doing the heptathlon, that kind of thing. What do you feel like is the sport that's the most challenging to prepare for? Because not that they're not all hard, but there are certain ones that just take a little bit more.
There are, and I would say the multi-eventer is probably the toughest.
Okay.
Something like what Sadie's doing, because there's so much balance involved, and if you get too heavy on one, you're going to sacrifice somewhere else. I really feel like something like that's so extreme one way or another is probably the most difficult. But you got to throw, I think, wrestling in there, because you're managing so much. You have to be conditioned, but you can't be so conditioned that you're not strong.
Right.
And then you can't be so strong that you're not explosive. And you're working through all the body systems.
Sure.
So you're working through, your anaerobic, your ATP, creatine system. So 5 5 to 7 second bursts. We need to maintain that.
Sure.
But then if you're good and you're wrestling at a high level with other high level wrestlers, you're going full periods, full matches.
Right.
You better have the endurance, muscular, and I guess cardiovascular to carry you through that. So that's a whole balancing act. Fast twitch muscle fibers to slow twitch muscle fibers, and
pain threshold, and
pain threshold,
'cause
rest,
I don't know
recovery,
that-
hydration.
I don't know that I've ever known a wrestler to go through a season without something, right? Whether it's an ankle, a knee, a wrist, a finger, whatever. Because again, there's so much contact with someone else that doesn't want you to do what you're trying to get done, right? So there's that going both ways thing.
And you're in an isometric state a lot. And if you don't prepare for that, that is a lot of abuse on the body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going against an opposing force that's equal to you,
Right.
who can outlast.
Right.
The one thing about wrestling that I don't know that we look into as much as we can is all training has residual effects.
Mm-hmm.
Once your cardiovascular system is set up to its peak, which hopefully mid wrestling season to late, it's at its peak. Well, you have 30 days before you really see a decrease in that. Okay. So now you can start adjusting, kind of like the triangle we talked about earlier, where you can do that same way. Strength's going to be somewhere in that same time frame, 28, 24 days. You're going to maintain your peak strength.
Okay.
Especially wrestling, especially
Sure.
doing the sport, you'll maintain that.
Right.
Now, if you was just to go home and sit and do nothing, that's obviously going to change.
Deteriorates quickly. Sure.
So you know a month out from state that you need to hit those things, but they shouldn't be your focus anymore.
Right.
Now, speed, especially linear sprinters, while you don't think about that for wrestling, you have to develop that quickness.
Sure.
You're only getting 3 to 5 days out of that.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
you better be touching on it again.
Okay.
Power, you're looking at a couple of weeks. So you start, whether you Olympic lift or whether it's plyometrics, whatever it is you do to create power, you need to be touching on that a little bit more, because that's going to, the residuals of that aren't near as long.
Sure.
And then, so then you bring your weights down, because strength isn't quite as important, but compensatory acceleration, how fast you move the weights, does become a bigger deal. So that plays into your power. So you start dropping the weights, more reps, but you're moving it at an insanely high speed. That's what you're going to need closer to, whether that be, you can't always plan on state. So you'd be looking at right before state.
Right.
And then hopefully
District
you're,
tournaments.
yeah,
blah, blah,
hopefully
blah.
you
Sure.
maintain that peak, which you should. You maintain that peak into state, but you prepare for that. You know your conditioning's good because you conditioned all year. You can back off that a little. Not saying give it up, but
Right.
you can't wear yourself down, because you need to be recovered better than
Right.
the top wrestlers in the state.
Sure.
So understanding that makes wrestling unique. The peak's different, what they're balancing with practice, how much they're running, who they're wrestling, who their partner is,
Sure.
all that matters.
It is an amazing sport. If you've never went to a meet, go to a meet. You will come away, and I've said this on this podcast, some of the best officiating in high school sport, maybe even college and pro sport, is wrestling referees. I think they do a tremendous job. Obviously, you only have 2 wrestlers to worry about, right? So it's a lot easier than one guy watching 22 football players. However, they do a tremendous job. They are checking in to make sure that those kids don't get hurt by being in a bad position, but they just do a great job of understanding and teaching the rules to especially younger wrestlers.
Right.
And that, some of them kids, when my son started, he started in 6th grade, the wrestling. We saw young people coming up that their mom and dad had to pick them up out of the stands and walk them down the bleachers. I'm like, oh my goodness, we're starting late in 6th grade. But it's a lot of fun to go, whether it's youth wrestling or at the high school level. And the young ladies, they've got their own division. I think, this is the 3rd year, I think, for ladies wrestling. They will impress you. They go after it.
And especially some of our even local. I think.
We've got
really good wrestlers.
Yeah,
really
in
good
both,
female
especially
wrestlers.
women's and men's, but
Yes.
women's for sure as well.
And I do
fun.
think the female wrestler needs to train a little different than the male wrestler. Now, technical's technical.
Sure, of course.
But the female wrestler wrestles different than the male wrestler.
Absolutely.
There's a lot more isometrics, a lot more holds,
Yes.
and then explosion.
Right.
Where boys don't quite wrestle that way. So I think when we figure that out, I think you'll see less injuries in the girls' side.
Sure.
We've kind of got boys figured out.
Right.
Right. But girls, they're dealing with a different body type.
Right.
And they wrestle different. So
Yes.
we have to figure out how to train for that. Why it's not a different sport. It's approached differently.
Right. Right. Well, it's like they talk about with tennis or whatever, right? It's the same sport, but it's not necessarily played the same. If that's,
Right. Yeah. You watch girls wrestle, they're
Basketball.
gonna lock up. And they're really gonna push on each other a lot, almost like heavyweights in males.
Right.
And then they're gonna look for the throw
Right.
and
right.
then take it. I don't know. I think as the sport evolves, that'll probably go away
Sure.
eventually. But right now, while it's kind of in its infancy for a lot of girls, that's how they wrestle.
Yeah. It's been a while. They do a great job. And when you go to one of those and watch them, you realize why it is such a difficult sport, and it's a select few people that can really do it well.
And I don't want to take away from basketball, but it seems to me like if you can get your kids wrestling early and they like it, they will be successful. If they don't, they can pick basketball up
Yes.
a lot quicker
Sure.
than you're going to pick up the sport of wrestling.
Sure.
And not everybody's going to be 6 foot. Not everybody's going to be a twitchy kid. Not
That's
everybody's going to find that way on the basketball floor. But the wrestling mat, it holds a lot of possibilities for young athletes.
It really does.
What type of exercise? We've talked a lot of specifics, but like just generally, what kind of exercises or training should just everybody do more of?
I think just getting up and getting out. If we're talking general population,
Yeah, just
general
general-
population just needs to move and start feeling better.
Yeah.
Then once they feel better, it's not going to fail. You can go to any gym in America and you'll see the same people on the same treadmills that look the same a year later.
Mm-hmm.
They outgrow that training and they don't evolve. And I really want to say the key is to raise your basal metabolic rate. So how many calories are you burning just sitting here listening to a podcast or being on a podcast? If you don't get that up and you just work on treadmills or whatever, it's just calories in, calories out. What's the bank? Well, you can walk on a treadmill a long time, and one trip to Taco Bell is going to do away with 3 or 4 days of a treadmill.
Sure.
But I do think it's important to get started, get moving, get feeling better, and then find some sort of resistance training, whatever you're comfortable. Not everybody wants to do what we do. I get that. But maybe adding weight vests or something like that when you're walking and then getting to feel a little better. But your body is going to adapt to what you put it through.
Yeah.
Dumbbells when you walk.
Right, dumbbells when you walk.
Something
So
like that.
if you're walking a mile a day, that's going to have to turn to 5 miles in a couple months, which is going to have to turn to 10 miles in a couple months after that.
It's going to do nothing but walking.
Yeah, and then now how much time do you have to commit to walking? If you would incorporate some sort of resistance training, whether that be through bands, dumbbells, something, you can get around spending your whole life on a treadmill, counting, watching the time click down and wishing you were doing something else.
Yeah.
Right,
Don't get content and stagnant is basic.
Right. And then as you start feeling better, take on more of what you like to do. I'm not saying that, resistance training is where you should start. You should start at what makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And then take that a little further and a little further. And then like anything, diet's the key.
Yeah.
You got to figure out what it is you're eating, what it is you like, and how to make it a lifestyle where you're controlling your plate.
So difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Trust me, it's so difficult.
But I think what you say is it's very true and it resonates. I mean, I know last year I got in a little bit better shape, not that I was in good shape, but I was going out every night and jogging a mile. But after a summer of doing that, I stopped seeing results because I was just doing the same thing. So I think what you say kind of rings true.
Yeah, and you're eating more food because you're burning more calories.
Yeah.
Your body's going to find a way to balance. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, you're in better shape, but you're not making gains. And
Yeah.
then once you quit making gains, it's hard to get up and go out there and run.
Because you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And then you fall back to where you were when you started.
Talk about that plateau with weights.
Right.
Same
Same thing.
concept,
And, a lot of Americans go through it.
It's a thing.
So, what is the craziest thing you've seen in the gym? Maybe your gym, another gym, just one of the craziest gym stories or craziest things you've seen.
Man, I've seen a few things, and then there's crazy good and there's crazy bad.
Always is.
A Gents Griffith one night came in, and he hit 495 on a box squat for 5.
Wow. That's
when
impressive.
he was at his peak. I had never seen a kid do that.
That's
I know there's people in the world that can do it, but in our gym, in our population, I had never seen a kid that strong.
Probably haven't seen it since either.
No, I have not. I watched Hunter Bailey one time pull, I want to say it was over 500. It was on blocks. We were prepping for a meet, and he pulled over 500. I watched Bryler Ford pull 500 like it didn't even exist. Just reached down and just picked it up. Those both are pretty impressive deadlifts.
Yeah.
As far as the lifting goes, that was some of the craziest stuff I'd seen. And then, you have your accidents every once in a while and some stuff happens, and it's scary at the time, but once the dust settles, it becomes comical, but
right.
Get toppled head over heels or something happens that you weren't expecting.
And there's not a whole lot of soft stuff in a gym, right?
No, there's sure not. There's
no padding to fall into.
Even the mats are hard,
Right.
So
they got to stand the pressure of the weights on them.
You try to keep everything in control, and accidents happen, and sometimes it's on an exercise that you least expect it to happen.
Right. That's sometimes why they happen, right? It's
You let your guard down, and
right.
Typically you get a kid set up and you get their form right, that heavy weight's not going to be what hurts them. And then all of a sudden you do a warm up for a sprint and they got a twisted ankle. You're like, how did this happen?
Right. I saw a young lady one time, really good high jumper from, I think she was from Midway. And I was helping in the high jump pit, setting it up, marking stuff down, and working with a coach. And I was just kind of the gopher. And she goes up and makes the high jump. Beautiful. Did a great job. Takes a step off of the mat and rolls her ankle and dislocates her ankle. Walking off, like she was off the mat, took a step, whoop. And I was like, what in the world, after all that stuff and how athletic she looked to walk and mess herself up. It's crazy sometimes.
I don't know if it's the letdown of the stress. Like you think the stress is gone, you're safe. And then.
Yeah, something happens. It was wild.
Sometimes it's even just walking down steps.
Yes. For some of us, walking down steps is a chore. So we talked about goals, right? But what's the future in your mind for VooDoo Power look like?
That's probably a good question. I have a few different ideas. I don't know that any of them would ever happen. We just got to see how it develops. I think eventually we're going to have to figure out how to, we'll see, but we're going to have to figure out how to make it a little bit more inviting, make it a little bigger, bathroom, things like that make it more accessible. Right now, it's just, we didn't know it would be like this.
Sure.
So you just develop it as it goes on.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And we've got a little bit more room to grow. The overall goal would be to have an open space where we can maybe do a little bit more sprinting, running, things like that in there where it's not so confined. We just got to see who shows up.
But that's exciting.
It is exciting. It is.
I mean, if I was in your, that would be so exciting to think about all the kids that are showing up and getting better, and that,
and hopefully you're helping
the next
them
one. Then the next one in the door. What can we help them do? That process of building is so important, right?
And kids trust you, and you do everything you can, and then they bring their friends because they learn that, hey, this is different than what we've been exposed to. There's actually progress here, where maybe they weren't getting it before. Maybe they were, but the atmosphere is different, or whatever it is that draws them in. Hopefully, we keep expanding on that and adding sports and adding more females on top of the males. That way, the balance is better. And they're all doing different sports. So hopefully my understanding can help them accelerate in whatever it is they want to do.
That's awesome.
I always wanted to teach speed. Gym's full of throwers. So now I got to figure out
Right.
how to have throwers prepared for the platform instead of sprinters.
Sure.
So that's been exciting too, is the adaptation of what you know.
I there are people. My wife is this way. She gets excited about learning things, right? And there's something out there that just makes you right, like you're talking about adjusting from sprinters and that kind of thing to throwers
Right.
in track. It's exciting to learn those new techniques and
is.
those new things, right? That's fun.
And the passion pulls you, right?
Absolutely.
You found something you like, and then the interest is there, and then I don't know how many books I have, but usually there's a book getting dropped off every day.
That's awesome.
You get through it, you use what you can use. Some of it you may not understand yet. You go back to it, you revisit it, you try to implement it where you can. And if you see gains, well, then you're gaining ground.
Sure. That's awesome.
So, talked a lot about the gym, learned a lot of great things, but you also have your own podcast.
Yeah, I do.
Talk a little bit about that. What inspired it? What do you talk about? What goes on there?
All right. So this goes back to, I was on a vacation in Florida.
Okay.
We were just relaxing, enjoying the summer, and Matt Cunningham called and asked if I would do Prepcast.
Okay.
That sounded like a good time to me. So yeah, I'll do
It is.
Prepcast. Well, I've done it for 3 years now, and I'm probably gonna have to back away from it a little bit just because life's gotten so busy and some other opportunities have come up. But
Sound like your plate's full. Yeah.
right. Well, I'm glad I got to do this run. I got to
Absolutely,
do
sure.
2 state games, and that's
That's
amazing.
awesome. Yeah, great for you.
So anyways, while I'm thinking about that, I started thinking, well, wouldn't it be cool to do a podcast with athletes? Very similar to where you guys are at. And was kind of the genesis of the idea. So we started bringing 2 athletes in on Saturday mornings. We called it Plates and Pancakes. I'd usually fix breakfast, kind of break the ice. Then we go in, we do a podcast. I had some questions that I would ask that were pretty routine. And, make some jokes, have some fun, build some TikToks,
Right.
No paper anymore. It was a way people could listen to their kids or their kids' friends and kind of build what used to be.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, you guys know, not every athlete wants to come on,
Absolutely.
and there's only so many athletes in the county.
Correct.
I was trying to bring them in from other schools. That wasn't super successful. I was running out of kids at Adrian that really wanted to.
Right.
I adapted it to coaches. I brought your guys' coach up, Phil Dean from Drexel, Drew Smith from Archie, some of those guys. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, where am I going to go?
Yeah.
It's very limited on how far I can take it
Sure.
at a local level.
Sure.
So I emailed like some, let's call them whales,
Right.
guys you really aren't expecting to hear from.
Sure.
But if one of them bites, maybe you have something.
Yeah. You don't know until you fish.
Right. And in the training world, Tony Holler, Feed the Cats is kind of a big deal. And I learned about him from Phil Dean and Drew Smith. They both have kind of a Feed the Cat system. So I emailed him, and he's just a teacher in Chicago.
Oh.
But he kind of developed a system. Sprint-based footballs come from it. And he said, sure, he'd come on.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, he enjoyed himself. I like you guys know there's a lot to learn about this, and you're going to make mistakes. But he was gracious.
No,
Yeah.
we don't do that.
Yeah. He was gracious, and he started feeding me guests, and then that turned into more guests, and then all of a sudden now it's on a national level, and it turned into something I never expected. I've got to talk to people that I never should have got to talk to.
Nice.
And it's made me better at what I do because real knows real. So they're going to sniff you out real quick if you're talking about something that's a little bit over your head or you don't understand.
Sure.
So when a guest comes on, you got to research what they may be doing, whether it be 5-3-1 or a 1x20. They might be doing a Russian system. They
Right.
might be doing a tier system. Well, you better know a little bit about it to have
Right.
a good conversation.
Sure.
And that's probably helped the gym more than anything because you
Awesome.
could talk to so many coaches. But that's where it's went and line them up. And I think, I in the world of the podcast we do, I feel like it was a good number, but I want to say last year we had like 13,000 downloads or something like that.
Awesome.
And it's
impressive.
it's a very niche podcast. I mean,
Yeah,
there's only so many guys that want to listen to strength and conditioning for an hour and a half.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, that's kind of how it started. That's where it's evolved, and that's kind of where we're at now.
So what you mentioned, some great guests that you've had on, and you've done quite a few episodes. I think when I looked, I mean, one I saw was like your 172. I mean, how many episodes have you done? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Ooh, off the top of my head, no. I want to say if you look on YouTube, some of them are going to be short, so it's going
Yeah.
to make the number look a little different. I want to say we're definitely 150 in
Okay.
or so.
That's a lot.
That's good.
Yeah, we haven't hit that mark just yet. We're ways away. But so out of all those episodes and some of the great guests you've had, have you had a favorite episode? I mean, for whatever reason, maybe the topic, maybe the guest, but have you had man, that was my favorite?
The one that is my favorite, and if you listen to it, if you do go back and listen to it and wonder why it's my favorite, please know that I don't censor the guests. So they talk how they want to talk.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
Jim Windler was my favorite. Huge power lifter. He helps high school kids in I want to say London, Ohio.
Okay.
Wrote 531, come up with that system. He wrote all those books, and it's a method that we use. Plus he's just likes Nebraska, he likes Nebraska football, Boyd Epley.
A lot of things in
Just a
common.
lot of things
Yeah.
in common.
A lot of
Now,
good conversation.
yeah, now his language is really rough in there, but he says some really funny stuff. So,
Right.
but I think of all of them I've done, that is one of my favorites. I mean, I could rattle off quite a few that are, but if I only got to do one podcast, that would have been the podcast.
Nice.
That's fun. That's great.
Do you have, and because we've kind of talked about this handful of times, and you mentioned sending emails to Wales, do you have kind of a guest or two that you're like, man, this would be my guest? Like this would be kind of the end all be all. I want this person.
I don't know if I have the end all be all, but I do have a few guys that I've talked to trying to work that direction. They're really busy people, so I don't know if I'll get them or not, but off the top of my head, Justin Cavanaugh, I've talked to him a few times. He's moved from combine prep and strength and conditioning, which he still does, into speaker and different things like that. He works with Josh Allen, works with the Bills, Olympics. That would be one of them, and he's just a really good human on top of that. I've talked to Dane Miller a little bit. I'd like to get him set up. He's in Pennsylvania. He works with a lot of throwers.
Okay.
He went to Canada. He threw at Penn State. He went to Canada, worked with Bondarchuk, come back, kind of has adapted that system and worked through there. That's a few of them I've kind of have off the top of my head. Ed Cohn would be amazing. He's the powerlifting GOAT and just a really good person.
Yeah.
I've talked to him a few times, but I haven't been able to get him set down to do the
Right.
show.
Right.
But yeah, those three, if I could land any of them with a little bit of time, would definitely be a big catch.
Be high on your list.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So where can people find these? I mean, where people are like, oh, okay, I'm sold. I want to hear your podcast, and I want to see if you ever get those. Where people check you out at?
Okay, so I put it on. We talked a little bit about this before the show. I put it on Buzzsprout. So Buzzsprout, for the subscription, puts it on almost all platforms. It's VooDoo Power on almost everything I can think of.
It's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all that.
Yeah, you should be able to search it and find it there. And then it's got our logo on the cover. It's got a bull with some barbells behind it and says VooDoo Power. On YouTube, I want to say it's different. I want to say it's Plates and Pancakes on
Okay.
YouTube, because we set that YouTube account up before we
Prior to
shipping
shipping over.
and then I had went to VooDoo Power because it matched everything else we
Sure,
had.
of
Where when
course.
we were originally doing Plates and Pancakes, I didn't see it turning into this. So there's a little divide on the names.
Sure.
But YouTube, it's not much to watch, but usually you can watch a little bit of the video if that's just what drives you. But the podcast channel is where most people pick it
Gotcha.
up at.
Nice.
Gotcha.
So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast and whatever you're at.
Yeah. Go ahead. Check those
We're going
out.
to end the way we always do with some fun questions.
All right.
So some of these may be related to some stuff we talked about. Some are not at all.
Probably not, because these are Cody questions.
Okay.
I think Brad curated one.
One. Okay.
I think
We'll
you.
see.
I think you did.
See if
What
he's lying
is
or not.
what is your go-to pump-up song for the gym? You're getting ready. You want to be pumped up. What are you playing?
Oh man, music isn't a huge motivator like me,
Okay.
like it is like it is for some kids. So the musical taste, we have a TV in there and we turn it on YouTube, and it just depends what mood you're in. Runaway by Kanye. I don't know why that's stuck lately, but it has. You might walk in there one day and it might be some old Hank Jr. or Waylon Jennings.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You get some kids in there that think they grew up in the 90s and it's all Creed.
Right.
So I don't know that music motivates me the way it does some guys.
Gotcha.
But I do like Kanye, and sometimes we'll kick it on to kind of pick it up.
Absolutely. He's on my workout playlist.
Not mine.
Do you have a workout playlist?
Yeah.
Oh.
He ain't on there.
Okay. If animals could talk, which one would be the funniest?
Which one would be the funniest?
Yeah, what would be the funniest animal?
Oh, man. I almost think dogs.
Okay.
When you kind of look at them and see what was going through your head when you did that, I really believe that might be a good conversation.
Yeah, I don't.
Norman would be hilarious. My dog.
I would be scared what Wayne would say I'd be scared what my dog would say to me. He'd be cussing me out all the time. What is the most ridiculous attire you've seen somebody wear to the gym? You have any crazy outfits? Somebody walk in and
Yes.
okay.
I don't know why he did this. He was jacking around,
love it already.
and Gents Griffith walked in one day with a pair of hot pink brand shorts, and I can't remember what they said across the butt, and they were fluffy. And
Some of
they
them juicy kind of pants.
Yeah, and they just covered what they needed to cover.
Barely.
Barely.
I'm sure of it.
And that was what we were going to work out in that day.
Did he have a good workout in him? You were too distracted.
Been watching.
We had to go from a lower body day to an upper body day.
Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't going to be able to squat in those things.
Not without a rip out.
Sounds like something I'd wear to the podcast.
Oh boy, doesn't this for sure?
Our wardrobe manager won't let me wear certain things.
No, I'm the wardrobe manager.
If you had to eat one food for the rest of your life, what are you eating?
Oh, man, that's tough. My diet is pretty much the same every day.
Okay.
Whether I want it to be or not. We do throw some cheat days in there.
Okay.
So most of the time it'd be something breakfast. It would be eggs and chorizo probably. I eat a lot of that.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah,
Eggs are
breakfast.
great for you.
And I run a little bit of keto during the week, and then we'll have like one cheat day, and then we'll go back to keto. And eggs and chorizo are about the staple of it.
Eggs, and I tell you, Brad's favorite way to eat eggs. You put
You're gonna lie here.
You put some chopped up Spam in them, and you throw some Velveeta cheese and do cheesy Spam and eggs with Tabasco on the top.
He is so lying. I would put
Sounds-
Spam in my mouth.
Sounds very Hawaiian.
I'm
Throw
not.
some
No,
pineapple
he's
in
lying.
it.
I wouldn't eat Spam. I promise you.
It's my favorite breakfast. Brad's
I was
never
gonna
let me
say.
make it for him.
Yeah.
What is the silliest thing you've done trying to impress someone?
Oh man, I don't know. A lot, I can assure you.
Not wearing pink shorts in the
It
gym.
wasn't wearing pink shorts in the
I
gym.
didn't impress nobody.
I don't know. I've done so much dumb stuff that I think the list would be very long.
A recent study, I don't know if you've heard this or know this, a recent study said that 50% of gym goers only go in an attempt to pick up a date. Have you ever heard any clever gym pickup lines?
Where did that come from?
The internet.
I'm not. Let's see. So I don't work in that population.
That's what I was.
You know
gonna
what I
say.
mean? So they're.
True.
But I mean, I've heard some funny stuff, like guys deadlifting and be like, "Well, how much your mom weigh?" You know,
Yeah.
I've heard some crazy funny stuff. Now, I
That's
wouldn't call them
hilarious.
pickup lines, but I don't think a lot of dates get made at the gym. So
Hallelujah.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes your life a lot
Yeah, it
easier, doesn't
does.
it?
Bench press.
All right.
What was the record for the heaviest bench
World
press?
record.
World record
Do you know it now?
The world record.
Bench press.
for weight.
Okay, so you're gonna have to kind of narrow that in because there's equipped and there's raw, there's single ply. So I want
I
to
think
say
it was equipped.
equipped. You're probably over. I want to say Dave Hoff is over 1,000, like 1,000. He's Mr. 3,000. So I want to say it's 1,005.
There
You're
was
the
a
one that
guy-
curated the fact.
I here. Let me look it up real quick because I saw it right here.
Thought you had this wrote down. I
I
thought you were
did.
prepared.
Jim Cobb K.
Oh, Jim Kolb? Yeah.
Kolb, 1,400
Okay,
and
and
a
that's
pound. Now it's equipped bench press.
yeah.
right?
And if you scroll up,
Yep.
I want to say that's an elite FTS. He is a big boy.
Huge,
Yes.
huge.
I didn't know what his number was. I was going off Hoff's.
I get it.
Hoff's got the biggest total.
I was shocked
And, yeah.
when I saw 1,400 pounds bench press, because there were guys. Again, I'm old, right? But back in the day when you used to watch Olympic wrestling, because that's when I was a kid, that's the only time you saw weightlifting
Right.
was in the Olympics. And they had some Russians on there, and I can't remember the man's name. He was a mountain of a man and would do the deadlift and the clean and jerk and all that stuff. And I was like, holy moly. And I mean, he was over 1,400 pounds, but 500-pound bench press back when I was a kid was like
right.
elite.
And you're talking, yeah, and we only saw it raw.
Right,
We didn't.
correct.
I mean, you start talking to bench shirts. There's a lot more to it. They suck in the compression.
Right.
A lot of them, if they don't fit their bench shirt right, they can't get the bar to their chest.
Yeah, he couldn't.
Yeah.
I watched that video.
It's so tight and it's
Yeah.
absorbing so much.
Yeah, he was an inch off his chest at least.
Yeah. So
That's crazy.
when
though.
Equip came in, WPO and West Side versus the World and all that stuff, it definitely changed. I mean, that's where your big squats come from is Equip squats. Now guys can squat raw really big, but
Right.
when you start squatting 1,200 pounds, most of those guys are suited up.
Yeah, that's nuts to me to think, because in my mind, okay, and again, I'm not a smart person, but in my mind, I look at 1,400 pounds and I go, how is his wrists not absolutely coming apart? His elbows not just coming apart, right? Because of all that pressure.
It's a huge amount, and they have to be very.
That's a car.
Yeah.
I mean, front end or whatever.
And they have to figure out what training works for them to be able to get there. And everything's set up on a peak because you can't live there.
Right. Oh, right.
You-
Absolutely.
It's just too much. So they work up and set a taper. They do all the things we talked about.
Right,
earlier.
right.
It's a build up to a meet.
To a pyramid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing.
Last one.
All right.
If your life was a sitcom, what would it be called and who would play you?
Man, I don't know where you got these questions.
In his head. They are all in his head.
That's yeah. I try to think of what sitcom would even come close.
Who would play you? Do you know that part?
Sean William Scott.
Okay.
Okay.
When I got the beard, I at least get told I look like him every once in a while.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
Okay.
So, and then I'm sure he's goofy enough that he could fit in right with our system. He'd blend right in.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Well, we want to thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Again, go check him out, VooDoo Power, and then Plates and Pancakes on YouTube. Check out his podcast. You'll really enjoy it. We appreciate Stephen being here with us. Man, we've had a lot of fun. I've learned a ton. I'm swimming in my head. I've learned so much from you. I had in no way did I know how technical and how
In depth.
yeah, you all were up there, but it now it makes it so much clearer why you're having so much success up there, right? Because you know your business, and that's impressive. And if you've got a young person,
I was just going to say that before we end this, if there's some young athletes watching this that want to get hooked up with you, what's the best way for them to get hooked up with VooDoo Power in the gym?
I do get a lot of messages from high school kids, mostly on Instagram.
Okay.
And
Is that kind of the best route?
that's probably the best. It's VooDoo
Okay.
4 Power on Instagram. That's
Okay.
probably the easiest. Or if you know somebody, talk to them.
and they all know everybody now.
Yeah, my
Right?
number,
They
my
all know.
number's out there.
Sure.
It's just I don't know how appropriate it is to throw it out on a podcast, but we'll find a way.
Yeah,
Whether that be
absolutely.
Instagram or
Well,
TikTok, whatever. The
And
case may
again,
be.
get a hold of us and we'll get you
Yeah.
in touch.
Yeah.
We can do that too.
Yeah.
So, but we do appreciate it, man. I've learned a ton, and glad you were here. Appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate you watching another episode of Tailgate TV.